Hello, this is going to be my final Build a lecture. This is going to be the bonus Build a lecture that we were assigned in case we had not done some of the other ones, which I didn't have time for. So this one's going to be on chapter 25. It's about microbes in our environment and the concept of One Health. First, we're going to talk about microbial ecology. Microbial ecology is the study of microbes and the locations that they naturally inhabit in today's world. In recent years, we've realized just how broadly microbes exist. Up until this point, we weren't really sure just how vast they were. It's actually just a staggering amount, so that was kind of surprising, I guess. Far more bacteria that has There's far more bacteria that have never been cultured in our environment versus that has. So this is kind of a good thing, and also gives us a little bit of hope towards finding new microbes and stuff that we can use for antibiotics and stuff in the future. Because, as I said in earlier Build lectures, we are facing a possible antibiotic resistant crisis in the coming years if we can't find some new types of bacteria to kind of, play around with. Knowledge of viruses existing in droves in the ocean, that's also just a recent finding. Up until this point, we weren't even sure, just, I guess, that there were any viruses located in the ocean, but it's actually an overwhelming amount, which we also discussed in earlier Build lectures. I can't remember how many it was, but there's thousands upon thousands of them located just in so much as a tiny drop of water from the ocean. Genomic techniques is also something that's mentioned in this chapter. Genomic techniques is just a wide range of technology that it helps to figure out and change genetics of an organism. So kind of an example of this would be like GMO corn. They genetically alter it to make it more nutritious and have less, pathogens and disease. And then down here I have a little excerpt with about the microbial ecology. It's the ecosystem, which is a dynamic complex of organisms and abiotic environments that interact as a functional unit. And we mentioned habitat up above. What a habitat is just part of an ecosystem best suited to certain populations. Like human habitat would be like our houses. We're best suited to our houses. We're not suited to live out in the woods like bear and deer and stuff like that. Next, we're going to talk about element cycling. This is going to involve recycling of nutrients and elements. Biochemical cycles are something that occurs since there is not an endless supply of these elements, natural elements such as, like, especially for this area, coal, for example. This is not an element that's going to be around forever, so basically, you know, we have to find new alternatives for heating around here as far as that goes. There's not an endless supply, mainly of carbon, so it gets recycled and is reused over and over and over in a cycle. So these two cycles of recycling and biochemical cycles share certain characteristics as follows. So they do have similarities. First, all elements in existence are going to be derived from non-living um, eternal reservoirs. That's going to cause redox reactions, which we've talked about in earlier chapters. All elements rotate between living and non-living environments. Recycling by both means, there's a constant availability of nutrients in the atmosphere without fear of them being eradicated or causing constant buildup, and this is because of the recycling. Cycles are complex things. They're not simple, so it's kind of hard to really explain them in simple layman's terms that everybody would really understand when you really start trying to break it down. All life forms play a role in recycling. This is, of course, kind of conditional. Microbes are very important contributors to Earth's formation. For example, another part of this is going to be geomicrobiology. That's going to be the study of rocks, minerals, and formations such as fossil fuels, which we talked about a minute ago. Fossil fuels would be like using coal to heat, which is something we do here in Southwest Virginia very commonly. Next, we're going to talk about astromicrobiology. This is kind of like an extension of geomicrobiology, and that's going to be the study of life and body forms on other planets. These play a very important role in element cycling. And then here in the excerpt here, I'm kind of showing you kind of a picture of what it looks like when they do element cycling. So the carbon's going to be up in the air, and it's going to flow down and stuff, usually with rain or something of that nature, photosynthesis from the sun and stuff, and it's going to go into the water. It's going to go into the agriculture, like farming and stuff like that. It's also going to be in urban areas, industrial areas, water treatment plants. All of that's going to be kind of all intertwined together. And then below here, I have showing you the cycling of material in an ecosystem, how that works. So important nutrients and energy is cycled into the ecosystems. Next, we're going to talk about the carbon cycle. Carbon is one of the most widely found elements in all of biomolecules. Carbon cycle is what we're going to talk about here, and the carbon cycle is the most common cycle involving transfer of energy out of all elements. Carbon is recycled throughout ecosystems by a couple different ways, but the 6 main ways are going to be as follows. So first is going to be respiration, carbon point, carbon fixation, breaking down organic molecules, methane production, and breaking down limestone. Next, we're going to talk about how carbon dioxide plays a key role in this cycle. Methane, which is now acknowledged to be a strong greenhouse gas, is more than a unit of CO2. Methane actually confines 20% or makes up more than 20% of heat in the atmosphere, which can be an actual problem because it's causing the ozone to deplete, they believe, so that's kind of an issue. This is produced mainly by cattle, sheep, goats, and how this occurs is cattle, sheep, and goats. Obviously, you know, any living creature on Earth passes gas. So the gas passed from the intestines of these animals is what feeds into the atmosphere, the methane. Then over here, we're going to have like kind of an excerpt showing the carbon cycle. So this is going to occur, the CO2 is up in the air, as I said before. So photosynthesis, which is going to occur from the sunlight, which is taken in by the plants. And you also have the animal respiration and plant respiration, which feed back up into the CO2 and brings that carbon back up into the atmosphere. It goes back through, so it'll go down into actually the soil in the ground, through the roots. Decayed organisms in the ground also give off CO2 as they start to decompose. So this all just goes in a continuous circle throughout all life processes. It never ends. Next, we're going to talk about the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen makes up about 79% of total air volume on Earth, and the reservoir in the atmosphere is where it's contained. The largest portion of the environment is made up of it. Despite this, the majority of organisms on Earth actually do not have access to it. So that's how nitrogen gets there. But the nitrogen cycle is the pathway of nitrogen, the element, as it goes and moves through non-living things into living organisms and then back to non-living environments in a cycle. So it continues in a cycle just the same way that the carbon cycle does. There's just a few minimal changes. There's something called a nitrogen web, which is also called commonly because it causes a wide variety of reactions to occur in an intricate fashion. There's going to be 4 basic types of reactions. The first is going to be nitrogen fixation. Second is ammonification. 3 is nitrification, and 4 is denitrification, which we're going to talk a little bit more about those on the next slide. Microorganisms use all forms of nitrogen, including NO2, NO3, NH4+, N2, and organic nitrogen. And then down below here, I'm going to kind of show you the nitrogen cycle, which I don't know if you know anything about. Like having fish in aquatic life, you can actually do nitrogen cycle with your goldfish. They'll put off nitrogen and stuff, which you can actually use that water to water your plants. It's actually really good for them. It provides nitrogen to them. So you can have like a small aquatic creature such as a goldfish, and they're going to consume things in like the pond or even in your fish tank, and then their waste is going to be excreted out, and fish can actually have ammonia in their urine, which is going to break down and break down the ammonia into nitrates when it's filtered, and then the nitrates are going to be broken down even further into another form of nitrate. And it's also important to note nitrates are only toxic at high levels, and they're partially taken up by plants as a source of nutrients. As I said, you can actually do something like aquatics with plants, so you can actually put some plants in your fish tank with your goldfish, and it feeds nutrients to those plants, keeps them alive, and it looks pretty. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Next, we're going to talk about root nodules and natural fertilizer factories. There's a symbiotic association between bacteria, which are known as rhizobia and legumes. Rhizobia are gram-negative, motile, rod-shaped bacteria, and there's 3 different types. You got the rhizobium, the bradyrhizobium, and the azororhizobium. And they're going to colonize specific locations on root hairs. These create large, huge nodules, which I have a picture down below here. It kind of looks like there's little balls on the roots of the plant, and that's formed by those bacteria. The legumes, plants that create seeds and pods for consumption are what legumes are. So you have like peas, like snap peas, soybeans, alfalfa, clover, stuff like that. The rhizobia create nitrogen-fixing organs. As I said, the root nodules are tiny growths on the roots, as seen in that picture below, of seed pod plants that form due to the symbiotic relationship we just discussed. It permits fixation or attachment, rather, of nitrogen gas from the air, and it becomes a stable nitrogen source for the plants. Self-fertilization is something that occurs because of this, and it makes legumes very important because they can be grown in very poor soil or in countries that have few resources, very poor environments. Plant health as well as growth may better via inoculation with rhizobia. And then we have another little excerpt here kind of showing you how that whole process works and how the nodules are growing on that. All right, moving on. Next, we're going to go over ammonification, nitrification, and denitrification. This is going to be part of the nitrogen cycle. Organic debris made of copious amounts of nucleic acids and proteins are put off by dead organisms. Animal waste contains nitrogen, as I said before, like in the urine or the uric acid. Ammonification is where ammonia is released from the decomposition of organic materials. So when materials like animals and stuff start breaking down and decomposing, that's when ammonia is released from that. Then we have nitrification, which is ammonia oxidized in two phases. So what happens here is gram-negative bacteria, like for example the Nitrosphaera, they'll oxidize NH3 into NO2, and then nitrogen is acted upon by another group of nitrifiers. Examples of these is Nitrosomnias and Nitrosphaera, and there's a couple of others that I haven't mentioned here. And then we'll go over denitrification, which is the final phase of the nitrogen cycle. It's where nitrogen compounds are returned back up to the air to restart the cycle all over again. So this is a little picture here at the bottom showing you kind of what ammonification looked like. You have organic nitrogens, like this little rat here has died and it's putting off things, which is being absorbed into the plants and stuff, giving off to the bacteria and becoming like nitrogen gas to go back up into the air. And then we're talking about kind of like an example of what denitrification looks like with all these things, and it shows you going through the cycle of different types of nitrates. And then again with the goldfish thing, which we talked about before. All right, moving on, we're going to go over freshwater communities next. The environment is brimming with microbiological activity, and it's going to be a distribution of microbes in water, and these are going to be affected by sunlight, temperature, oxygen levels, and the availability of nutrients. The top portion of freshwater is self-sustaining. It has little organisms called plankton, which I have a picture of down here, different species of plankton in freshwater. Plankton are a community of microbes that free flow and drift along with the waves and currents of the water. A subunit of these plankton are phytoplankton, and these contain photosynthetic algae and cyanobacteria. Phytoplankton provide nutrients for zooplankton, and zooplankton are protozoa and invertebrates which filter microbes, and they feed and prey and scavenge on decomposing things. Deep parts of water contain more nutrients which support aquatic plants as well as both anaerobic and aerobic bacteria. And these are going to play a role in recycling dead and decaying matter. Addition of too many nutrients to freshwater can cause a problem in the ecosystem known as eutrophication, and this is very bad. This will use up all the oxygen in the environment in the water, and it's going to create kind of a film like I have in this picture here. It can be different colors. It can be green. It can also be like a red color similar to red tide that you can find in oceans, which we talked about in earlier chapters. This will lead to a mass death of fish and other invertebrates because they cannot get the oxygen they need to survive. And it's going to end up throwing off the whole ecosystem of the water, which will eventually kill the plants and a lot of the good bacteria too. It throws off the whole entire ecosystem of the water. Next, we're going to talk about microbes on land and in water. The majority of water we drink comes from rivers, aquifers, and springs, and water can only be used in its natural form without intervention in remote areas, underdeveloped regions, high mountainous regions, and in cities. All water must be treated before it can be used. Over here to the side, we're going to show what a water treatment system is going to look like from reservoir to home and all these different steps. Next, we're going to talk about sewage, which is wastewater, like from toilets and stuff. It's going to contain debris, such as toilet paper, bottles, sometimes you'll find and things like that, such as solid waste, chemicals, and microorganisms. Then we're going to talk about microorganisms in water and water treatment. Many places around the world still don't have access to clean water, and drinking unclean water leads to many illnesses. Most particularly diarrheal sickness is caused by this, and it'll kill millions of kids every year. Even in the United States, waterborne illnesses affect thousands. Clean water is equal to health. Next, we're going to talk about microbial fermentations in food products from plants. This is going to be stuff like pickles, bread, beer, wine, cheese, and yogurt, starter cultures, leavening, and Jaeger beer. Down here we have an example of what it looks like to have sourdough bread starter. Thank you.